Yeah. Good afternoon. We have a distinguished guest. I won't take a whole lot of time, but as a former judge, I'm concerned about some things in this country right now. And I want to read something that David French wrote today in the New York Times. American judges face two challenges at once: a public struggle to maintain independence and integrity when the government of the United States treats judicial reversals as impeachable offenses, and a private battle to maintain their resolve is occurring under conditions of fear. Our system, as I was a part of, is built to withstand the first challenge. Life tenure provides a firewall against most forms of governmental interference, and the present Congress would not impeach or convict a federal judge like me for ruling against somebody. But the second challenge is infinitely more difficult. Judges are, on state and federal level, are confronting an ordeal that they never expected to face: fear and insecurity, and personal resolve of moral and physical courage will decide the fate of our Constitution they swore and I swore to protect. Thank you. Are we there? Yeah. Hello? Yeah. Kelly, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm just dealing with a tech issue.
Okay, I got it. To the best of my ability, that's my statement today about judges and about our country. Thank you.
You.
With the couple club announcements. As always, thank you to our members who make an impact in our community, especially those with anniversaries this month. Former treasurer Jeremy Kopech has 14 years of service to the club. Incoming president Jeff Otis at 24 years. Bill Murphy, 32 years. 2002 president Rush Yelverson, 33 years. President in 2003, Ted Mao, celebrating 37 years of service, and 51 years for past presidents Mac McCarty and Larry Barrett. We've got some upcoming Zoom presentations. Gerald Harkness is visiting around his documentary, When Everyone Swims, on Thursday, August 14th. We'll also have a 9/11 remembrance. The Kurt Vonnegut Museum is marking Banned Book Week on Thursday, October 2nd. And Larry Dickerson and Jolene Katzenberger with Culinary Crossroads will be with us on Thursday, October 9th. Just as a reminder, we're at the Columbia Club on the third Thursday of each month with a speaker in 2 weeks on August 21st. IU Kokomo Professor Paul Cook, who is digging into artificial intelligence. That one is super interesting. I saw him present recently with the Hamilton County Chamber. And that conversation was it was super informative, very helpful, dispelled some myths, and provided a lot of insights. You can always catch the presentations on our YouTube channel, as Greg mentioned earlier. You can find those recordings on the upcoming event section of Indy. You can find all of our events as well as the recordings on the event section of indykiwanis.org. Mary, I think we have a social supper coming up. Do you want to hit on that?
I think she's struggling to get on right now.
Oh, we'll hold our appetites and come back to her. Roger, we also have IOZOs coming up. We're going to have full bellies and full hearts very, very soon. Would you like to hit on anything with that?
Sure. Even if we never learn anything, we've got to eat. So come and join us next Monday at IOZO's Garden of Italy on South Meridian Street for lunch at 11:30 to 1. Usually got a nice little group there to mingle with and chat, share our thoughts. And then I'll make an announcement also about...
Hi, my name is Steve Furo, and I was calling regarding a kayak rental.
Steve?
During...
Steve. So Steve's going kayaking.
I just muted Steve.
He's going kayaking today somewhere. So we've got a golf outing coming up, which is a big event for us. And thanks to Golf Outing Chair Eric Steele and Foundation Development Director Mike Halstead and myself helping out a little bit, our golf outing is on Tuesday, September 23rd. So we've got about 6 weeks left, 7 weeks maybe. It's going to be a great outing. We've got probably 90 to 100 players. We've sold most of our whole sponsorships, a couple of major sponsorships. Title sponsor is NEO Engineers, and silver sponsor is Gelzer Investment Management. And our food and beverage sponsors, North Mechanical, Heartland Builders, and Structural Design Inc., as well as 15 more whole sponsors. Hank's smoked briskets will be served for lunch. We are still looking for items for goodie bags. This could be logo, swag, anything like that, or a few large items if you have some or know of some available for a silent auction or possibly a live auction. We don't know yet. You can still sign up to participate or volunteer at indykiwanis.org. We'd love to see you come on out. If you come out and you just want to do lunch, we suggest you get there about 2 o'clock. Rounds should be finishing up between 2 and 2:30. So that's what we know about right now. Thank you.
Thanks, Roger. A huge thanks to you, to Eric Steele, to Mike Halstead for all of the work that has gone into making this, I think, our largest golf outing. Also to Kelly for supporting all of the efforts to make this happen. Like anything in Kiwanis, certainly a team effort. Quick district update. Our $20,000 Abe Lincoln Scholar, Matthias Pfister, will be the lunch speaker at the Kiwanis, Indiana District Convention this weekend in French Lick. Please send all of your good vibes and good wishes their way. Thanks to board members for their personal contributions toward the $200 IOZO's gift card and the Hinkle Tour, which will be part of the Indy Metro Division's basket at the auction at convention. You can bid on one of 25 baskets if you text the word IND Kiwanis, Indiana Kiwanis, to the number 76278. And if you need, I can drop that in the chat so that you have that. Bidding closes Saturday night at 8 p.m. All of the funds raised support Riley's Reach Out for Indiana campaign, supports accessible mental health services for kids and teens. Again, thank you for everybody supporting that, both through the donations of the gift basket items and for bidding. You can do both. And without further ado, I would like to introduce our speaker today, Ashley Petry. As someone commented as we were getting started, the legendary Ashley Petry. She joins us regularly with truly amazing insights into, and today it's about amazing Indianapolis. Ashley has been writing about the Midwest travel, food, drink, history, and arts for over 20 years. Her work has appeared in USA Today, Condé Nast Traveler, Midwest Living, and many other publications. We're excited to welcome her back to talk about her new book, Amazing Indianapolis. Ashley, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me back. It's always fun to present at Kiwanis. Is there a way I can do a screen share? Do we know?
You're a co-host right now.
Okay. So does that work then? Can you see that? Sorry, technical issues. Could you see that one?
No, we couldn't see it.
Okay. I don't know how to screen share. Somebody tell me how.
So look for the green share button at the bottom of the screen.
Yes, okay. And then share. Okay. Hopefully that works. Does that work?
Looks like it's coming up.
Yes.
There it is.
Okay,
And then
perfect.
you can click and make it full screen at the bottom.
Okay. My apologies for the technical delay. So thank you very much for that introduction. We're going to be talking today about some highlights from Indianapolis history. And these are based on my new book, Amazing Indianapolis, which comes out on the 15th. And it's essentially a roundup of interesting stories from city history. Some of them are more wacky, some of them are more serious, but they're all, I think, interesting. And I presented previously, this was a couple of years ago, about my book, Indianapolis, an Illustrated Timeline. And that was sort of a more serious history of the city. And there were a lot of things that came up in my research for that book that just didn't really fit the tone of that book. And so they are in this book instead. So there are a lot of stories here that I've been waiting to share for a long time, and I'm really excited to share them with you. So we're going to talk about some chapters in the book. We're going to jump around a little bit chronologically and do this a bit more thematically. But the first thing we're going to talk about is some Indianapolis inventions. A lot of things have been invented here, among them Barbasol shaving cream, Wonder Bread, which you may know about, the Gatling gun. The first machine gun actually was invented here during the Civil War. But we're going to talk specifically about 3 inventions, and one of them is the rear view mirror, which was invented here in 1911. Now, you may know that the Indianapolis Motor Speedway was built in 1909. And at the time, big events like the Indy 500 were kind of an afterthought. The real purpose of the track was to serve as a test track for Indiana's booming auto industry. At the time, it rivaled Detroit's. The issue was that we specialized here in Indianapolis in luxury vehicles, expensive vehicles, and so our auto industry did not survive the Great Depression in the same way that the assembly line up in Detroit did. But it did leave us the legacy of the racetrack. And so the first Indy 500 ran in 1911. And you can see on your screen the winner of that race, Ray Haroon, who was driving a car called the Marmon Wasp. Now, he was very strategic in the way he approached this race. So he wanted to make his car lighter. And one of the things that racers did at that time was carry a mechanic with them in the car. And part of the job of that mechanic was to let them know what traffic was coming up behind them. So Ray Haroon said, I don't want the weight of a mechanic. I'm going to dispense with the mechanic. His competitors said, no, that's not safe because you won't be able to see who's coming up behind you. And so sort of on the fly at the last minute, he invented a rear view mirror. And you can see it's sort of bracketed there above his wheel in the photo. He also was strategic in his speed. He calculated the exact speed he could go so that he could get more life out of his tires and have fewer pit stops, because he realized that it was the pit stops that were really taking a lot of time. So he just sort of poodled along at 75 miles an hour, and it was very much a tortoise and not the hare situation. But the time that he saved in pit stops was what brought him the win. And the rearview mirror and not having the mechanic was part of that win as well. So the rearview mirror and a number of other things were invented at the Speedway. The next thing we're going to talk about was a couple years later in 1914 was the invention of sliced bacon. Now, people had been slicing bacon for centuries, but this was packaged sliced bacon. And it was invented at Kingen and Company, which was a pork packing house that was founded here in 1864. It was hugely successful. By the turn of the century, they employed about 1,000 people, and they were processing about 600,000 hogs every year. And they were actually known for employing Irish immigrants. People in Ireland who were planning to immigrate to Indianapolis would send their luggage ahead of them, care of Kingen and Company. And then they would arrive here, claim their luggage, and hopefully get a job at the same time. But Kingen and Company was known for its innovations. One of its employees invented a refrigeration system that allowed them to work year-round instead of just in the winter when they could keep things cold naturally. So sliced bacon was just another innovation for this company, and they introduced that in 1914, and it was a huge success because it was a uniform thickness, so it was easier to cook, and there also was less waste in terms of the rind and things like that. So lots of other companies quickly picked up on the idea and started selling packaged sliced bacon as well, but it did have its origins here. The company was purchased by a Michigan company in 1952, and they actually closed the facility in 1966. But for more than a century, this was one of our major companies here in Indianapolis. And the final invention we're going to talk about is a bit more fun. It's Raggedy Ann. Now, the origin story of Raggedy Ann is that there was an Irvington illustrator named Johnny Gruelle. He was the first staff illustrator for the Indianapolis Star. And he was working in his office at home one day when his daughter Marcella walked in carrying this doll that she had found in the attic. And it didn't have a face, so he took his ink pens and he drew a face on the doll, and that became her doll. And he thought that that would be a really good base for a story. So you can see in 1915, he filed a patent application for the doll itself. And in 1918, he released the first book of stories about Raggedy Ann. Whether the origin story is true or not, he did patent and release more than 40 books about the Ragdolls, and all from his home in Irvington. And just a fun fact, the name Raggedy Ann comes from a merger of two poems by James Whitcomb Riley. One was called The Raggedy Man, and the other was called Little Orphaned Annie, which we're familiar with. So he combined those two poems into Raggedy Ann, and that's where we get the famous doll. So those are 3 Indianapolis inventions that are covered in the book, Amazing Indianapolis. The second chapter of the book is about unsung heroes of the city, basically overlooked locals. And I will warn you that this is the darker portion of our program for today, because the person we're going to talk about today as our unsung hero is Madge Oberholzer. I have spoken about her in the past. I like to speak about her whenever I have an opportunity. But essentially, in the 1920s, Indianapolis was a real hotbed for the KKK. There are some estimates that up to 40% of native-born white men in Indianapolis were dues-paying members of the KKK at that time. So the KKK had a real stranglehold on Indiana politics. And the person who was at the center of all this was the Grand Dragon. His name was D.C. Stevenson. Basically, he decided who would be governor, who would be mayor, and he really felt that he was above the law. So one evening, he called his neighbor, Indianapolis neighbor Madge Oberholzer, over to his house for what he said was urgent business. Now, she was a young woman who worked in the State House. She ran a program that provided books to children in rural areas. So when this very powerful person said he needed to speak to her about urgent business, she assumed it was something related to the funding for her program, and she hurried over to his house. When she arrived, she was forced to drink alcohol, and she was taken at gunpoint to a train bound for Chicago. On that train, she was sexually assaulted. She was bitten all over her body. It was just a complete nightmare. At a hotel the next morning, she asked for permission to go buy a hat because she had left hers behind at home by accident. And she was guarded at the store, but she still managed to buy some tablets of bichloride of mercury, which is a household cleaner. Now, you will hear people say that Madge Oberholzer died by suicide because she took the bichloride of mercury tablets. In fact, what she was trying to do was make herself so sick that D.C. Stevenson would have to take her home. He refused to get her medical treatment unless she would agree to marry him. She refused to marry him, so she did not get medical treatment for several days. Eventually, he took her home, and because of who he was and the power he had in the community, he assumed that she would keep her mouth shut about what had happened, but she didn't. She told the whole story in a deathbed declaration that was frank and clear and detailed, and ultimately, she did die from an infection in one of her wounds, and her deathbed declaration was so airtight that it sent D.C. Stevenson to prison for murder, which he didn't think was possible. And this actually kicked off a whole cascade of events that destroyed the KKK's hold on Indianapolis politics, Indiana politics. Obviously, it came at great cost to Madge Oberholzer, so she is worth remembering whenever I get the chance to do that. Okay. Next chapter is about the criminal element. And now we're going to move away from the grisly and the gory, and we're going to keep it light. And I'm going to tell you some stories about some fun and interesting criminal elements. So the first story I want to tell is about the Christmas jailbreak of 1821. Now, Indianapolis was named the capital in 1821, and it's important to remember that there was no city here. It was just basically swamp, just wilderness, with a few scattered cabins and farms and a couple of stores. So it became the capital, but there was no infrastructure here in those early years. So the first Christmas, a group of men showed up from Kentucky. They came up the White River on a keelboat, and they were quite drunk. But they wanted to be more drunk, so they tried to break into the grocery store for more alcohol. They were caught by the townspeople immediately. It was a small community. They made a lot of noise, and they were brought up before the justice of the peace. The issue was that Indianapolis did not yet have a jail. The nearest jail was 60 miles away in Connorsville. It was nighttime. It was the dead of winter. It was Christmas. Nobody wanted to trek 60 miles through the wilderness to take these guys to jail. So they came up with a novel solution. And what they did was they made a big show about how they were going to take these men to jail the next morning. And then they stuck them in an empty cabin overnight. And they maybe didn't guard the cabin very carefully. And the men from Kentucky escaped. They were never seen in Indianapolis again. And that actually solved the problem, which was exactly what they had planned all along, because this way nobody had to take them all the way to Connorsville, and they weren't a problem anymore. So that's how Indianapolis spent its first Christmas. Now we're going to jump ahead to another criminal element, which is our volunteer firefighters. And I know that sounds weird, but I will explain. The first firehouse was built in 1837. This was on the north side of Monument Circle, and it was staffed by a volunteer company called the Marion Fire Company. Now, firemen were unpaid volunteers, but they got some tax breaks. They were exempt from jury duty. So it was very popular to be a volunteer firefighter, and a lot of different volunteer companies sprang up all over the city. The issue was that they got competitive with each other about who would get what they called first water on the most fires. So in 1849, an insurance company here in the city offered a prize to the volunteer company that got first water on the most fires that year. And unfortunately, a lot of the city's vacant buildings started going up in smoke because everybody wanted the prize. So these volunteer firefighters actually became prolific arsonists. In another incident, the members of the Marion Fire Company that I mentioned, they wanted funding for a new building, and they were denied that funding. So they burned down their own building and said, well, now you have to give us money for a new building. So yes, prolific arsonists. By 1859, the city was sick of the shenanigans and instituted a professional fire department. And at that time, the volunteer companies were very upset. Some of them refused to give back the equipment that they were using. They did ultimately give it back. And ever since then, we've had a professional fire department. But if anyone ever asks you who the worst arsonists in Indianapolis history were, you can tell them it was the volunteer firefighters of the mid-1800s. And the other criminal thing I want to talk about today is the grave robbing conspiracy of 1902. So pictured on your screen is a man named Rufus Cantrell. He was known as the King of the Ghouls. What happened was, in 1902, several Indianapolis residents got anonymous tips that their relatives' bodies were being used for dissections at a local surgical college. Now that was odd because those bodies had been buried in cemeteries with full funerals. So they should not have been in medical schools being used for dissection. And this led to a whole investigation, which led to Rufus Cantrell, who was leading a group of what they called resurrectionists to get these bodies out of the cemeteries. He admitted that he and his colleagues had nearly cleaned out some of the city cemeteries. The issue was that medical schools at that time were using new methods of teaching, and dissection was one of those. But modern embalming techniques had not been invented yet. So they were constantly needing new bodies for their classes. And essentially, the professors were complicit in this grave robbing scandal. They basically ordered new bodies from the grave robbers whenever they needed a new body for dissection. How it worked out was the grave robbers themselves went to prison. The professors who were involved were either acquitted or they were simply never prosecuted. But that's why many of the city's early cemeteries are essentially empty. All right, the next chapter we're going to talk about, this is the most fun chapter. It's called Pure Weirdness. I noticed when I went back over this presentation that I included a lot of things from Irvington. So one more thing from Irvington, and that is the Irvington School War of 1877. This is one of my favorite stories. So for the school year of 1876 to 1877, there was a school teacher named Lydia Putnam, and the school board signed a contract with her to continue teaching in the following school year. But over the summer, 2 of the school board members resigned and were replaced, and there were only 3 to begin with. So now there's two new board members on this 3-member board, and this newly constituted board signs a contract with a different teacher. So over the summer in Irvington, there's a lot of controversy about which contract is valid, which teacher should teach, but Lydia Putnam decides that she's going to teach. So on the first day of school, she marches into the school building. She passes right by the school board members and she sits down at her desk and she says that she will leave only by process of law because she has a contract. Now, rather than calling the police, the school board members physically removed her from the building, dragged her out the front door, and then locked the front door behind her. They forgot there was a back door. So she came around the building, came in the back door, and sat down at her desk again, and they physically removed her again. And keep in mind that this was happening in front of an entire room full of school children. She ultimately had the board members arrested for assault and battery, and they were convicted. She also sued for the value of her contract, which she won. But it was sort of a symbolic victory because she did not teach in Irvington that year or ever again. But that event caused controversy that was debated in Irvington for many, many years after that. The other sort of pure weirdness thing I want to talk about is the death of Leonidas Grover in 1879. Now, what you see on your picture or on your screen is a meteorite. And that's because Leonidas Grover was a man in Fountain County who was killed in his sleep by a meteorite, and he was discovered dead by his daughter the next morning. Now, this was a media sensation. The Indianapolis Journal printed the original story, and then it was reprinted in all sorts of other newspapers. It was even included in a scientific study. It was a big deal. Now, the state geologist was a man named Edward Cox, and he was fascinated by this. So he sent a friend down to Fountain County, up to Fountain County. I don't know where Fountain County is, to Fountain County to retrieve the meteorite and get more information about what had happened. So the friend came back a little while later. He had the meteorite with him. He had a picture of Leonidas Grover. He had a map of the house's layout, and he put all of this on display at a local drugstore. The problem was the story wasn't true. A writer at the Indianapolis Journal had just slipped it into the pile of stories as a joke and never had expected it to go this far. When the friend got to Fountain County and realized that it was a hoax, he decided he was going to play along. So he faked the evidence. He got a big rock and he painted it black. He found a photo of a random man and said that was Leonidas Grover. And so everything that was on display in the drugstore and that the newspapers were talking about was completely fake. The Indianapolis Journal had to print a retraction and an apology, and they had to admit that actually there had never been a Leonidas Grover in the first place. But that was the big news in Indianapolis in 1879. The last chapter I want to talk about is our surprising connections. And basically, this one is about nationally known figures who played an important role in Indianapolis history that we don't generally talk about or know about. And one of those people was John Muir. You may know him as a naturalist and a botanist, but you may not know that he lived in Indianapolis for a while, and that actually one of the major incidents of his life occurred here. When he was a young man, he was very conflicted about being a naturalist and a botanist versus being an inventor and working with machinery, because he had a real talent for tinkering and inventing things. He was working at an Indianapolis factory in 1867 when an accident occurred that left him temporarily blind. Basically, he was working with a file, it shot out of his hand, and it went into his eye. And then his other eye also went blind, sort of in sympathy. Now, they didn't know whether this blindness was temporary or permanent, but he spent months lying in a dark bedroom here in Indianapolis, waiting to see whether his vision would recover. And that gave him a lot of time to think about his future and what he wanted to do if he was able to. So he decided then and there that he was going to be a botanist and a naturalist. And of course, we know he became the father of the modern conservation movement, but that was because of decisions that he made here when he was in Indianapolis. Another person who had an impact a little bit on Indianapolis was Thomas Edison. You may not know that he actually worked here at Union Station as a transcriptionist during the Civil War, not transcriptionist, the telegraph operator, excuse me. He was a telegraph operator at Union Station during the Civil War. One of his jobs at Union Station was to transcribe news reports that came over the wire, but they came across the wire very quickly, and he had trouble keeping up. So he invented a machine that he called a repeater, and essentially it recorded the news reports so that he could play them back more slowly and transcribe them more easily. Now, there are two stories about what happened next. One story is that even though his transcriptions were much better, the newspapers didn't appreciate the delay in getting their news, and so they complained to his supervisor. The other version of the story is that his colleagues were embarrassed and jealous because his transcriptions were so much better, so they complained to the supervisor. Either way, the supervisor found out about the repeater machine, he banned its use, and Thomas Edison left Indianapolis soon after that. But later on, the inventor of the phonograph said that this repeater had been inspired, or this repeater inspired the phonograph. So the phonograph's origin story actually takes place here in Indianapolis. And the final person we're going to talk about today is John Wilkes Booth. Obviously, this is the man who assassinated Abraham Lincoln. But before he was an assassin, he was actually a celebrated actor. He was particularly known for his roles in Shakespeare plays. And he performed here in Indianapolis several times between 1861 and 1863. He did get mixed reviews. The Indianapolis Daily Journal said, "We don't admire Mr. Booth, and by what art he became a star is more than our astronomy can explain." But other newspapers were more complimentary of his performance. Of course, a couple of years later, he became famous in a very different way. But he did spend some time here in Indianapolis before that happened. So those are some highlights from Amazing Indianapolis. As I said, it's available for pre-order, and it's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all the usual places if you want to pick it up. And I'll also be doing a book signing on Sunday at the Irvington Farmers Market if you want to stop by and say hello. But I think we have time for some Q&A.
Hello, this is Greg Silver. Hello. Wonderful book, wonderful ideas. John Muir, very important to me and to the world. Of course, all those that you mentioned, Thomas Edison and Booth himself. So there was a story that I wanted you to know about that I don't think you had known about. There's another famous character, not as famous as those were, but it was a dog named Napoleon. Okay, so Napoleon in 1960, I think, was found with a homeless person under a bridge somewhere downtown. And the city decided they were going to take Napoleon away from this guy and put him in a pound. Napoleon was a bulldog, I think a bulldog, but I'm not positive of that. Anyway, so that got into the wire services, went all over the world. My father was police commissioner, and he would receive hundreds of letters and donations of how to feed and take care of Napoleon. So, and the also the vagrant. This is it was all written up in the papers for weeks. So the city of Indianapolis saved the dog, gave him a royal treatment with all this money, and the vagrant was hired to be working for the city at some I thought at a market or something of that nature. But it put Indianapolis on the map for some kind of sympathy for living things, and it made us proud to be from Indianapolis, to know the support that that dog and the individual got. Eventually, Napoleon and his master disappeared, never to be found again. But that was a very famous story in the 60s. I checked that in the news and the Star or whatever. Napoleon the dog.
That's fun. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
I hope it worked out for them.
I don't know. Nobody knows what happened to Napoleon and the individual. But I think Napoleon survived because of goodwill of many, many people around the world.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any questions, other
Ashley,
questions for me?
what got you interested in this information, this history of Indiana and Indianapolis?
Sure. So I started my freelance career writing about travel primarily. And as part of that, I wrote a couple of books about things to do in Indianapolis. And as I was researching that, I kept coming across fun stories from the city's history, and just got more and more involved in researching those stories. And that led to my previous book, An Illustrated Timeline, which, was a more comprehensive history of the city. And it's kind of fun, I found, to be taking books out of the library that nobody's taken out for 50 years, and to be finding all sorts of bizarre stories in these books. I found in one very old, very dusty book, the story of Indianapolis's first exorcism, actually, which was not a real exorcism. Basically, a child was sick, and the parents went to a local minister who was also a physician and said, "Our child has been cursed by a witch. You have to come do an exorcism." And the minister didn't believe in that for 1 second, but he also thought it would have a placebo effect if he performed the exorcism, and that the child would get well. So he faked an exorcism, completely made it up as he went along, and the child actually did get better. So that's the sort of bizarre, fun story that you find in these old books that deserve to be brought back into the light.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
What's your next book? What's your next book going to be?
So in October, I have a book coming out. It's a new edition of my 100 Things to Do in Indianapolis guidebook. So that comes out October 15th. So two books in 2 months. I'm a little bit busy.
Amazon,
Yes,
online.
Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all the usual places.
Sounds wonderful. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate the illustrations that you showed in the presentation here. And I was wondering about how do you find them? The cover in color with some historical images in color. How did that come about?
So a lot of the images come from places like the Indiana Historical Society, or the Indiana State Library, places like that. The Indianapolis Motor Speedway has a whole repository of photos for the race and the track and that sort of thing. In terms of the photos being in color on the cover, I can't claim any credit for that because the designer did that. And I have no idea how it was done. But yeah, and there's also just a lot of photos that are freely available in places like Wikimedia Commons and places like that. So yeah, there's all sorts of different places to find those photos.
Another
Any other
interesting book.
questions?
I have thought another interesting book would be Heroes of Indiana, those who stood up with courage, either as judges, lawgivers, baseball players like Carl Erskine, those who tried to set a tone for tolerance and goodwill. Carl Erskine is a perfect example of that. But there are others, and whether they were governors or whether they were individuals that try to bring some good to whether I'm thinking about Eli Lilly, people like that really ended up making a great mark on Indiana, on Indianapolis. I don't know. That's just a bug, thinking. I know you got a unique topic here. Yeah, yeah, very unusual. Yeah, yeah. And we need to remember. We need to remember. That's the problem. We don't remember where we came from or where we're going. And you can help us.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
I may have missed this earlier. Are you from Indiana?
Yes. I was actually born in Lafayette, but I only lived there for a couple of weeks. When I was a baby, my parents moved me to Indianapolis, so I've been here my whole life.
Okay. Just wonder what sparked your interest.
A part of it is that I'm just very passionate about the city. I feel like, there's a chapter in the book about locals who are overlooked, and I feel like Indianapolis is a city that's often overlooked. So being able to share stories about our past and also our present is a real honor for me.
Cool. Thank you. Keep it up.
Thank you.
There's more to learn for all of us, I'm sure.
Yep.
Ashley, you mentioned that you had been in Key Club and Greenfield. Can you tell us a story or any memory of a service project or something you had done while you were in Key Club? That's amazing.
This is the 90s, keep in mind, when I was in high school. So it's a long time ago. I think I remember raising money for iodine with little salt containers. And carrying those salt containers around the school and asking for spare change. And that's the one that stands out in my memory. Does that ring a bell for anybody?
Oh yeah, that's a big
Yes,
project,
yeah.
and it was a big success.
Oh,
Iodine
good.
deficiency disorder project saved a lot of lives. So thank you for doing that.
Oh, my pleasure.
Every time you speak, it seems like, is it just me or a lot of weird stuff happen in Irvington? It just seems like Irvington is the hotbed of weirdness. And I like Irvington.
Yeah, it was sort of an accident that today's presentation involved multiple stories about Irvington, because I was just picking the ones that I thought were the most fun. Well, they're not all fun, but yeah, so that was a little bit of an accident. But yeah, a lot of weird stuff happens in Irvington.
You mentioned, DC
Stevenson.
Stevens, I was going to say Stevenson, the Grand Dragon. His house is still there in Irvington, still stands today.
Yep. You can actually, if you take one of the ghost tours that they offer during the Irvington Halloween Festival, which is a fantastic festival, but these ghost tours actually go by his house and by Madge Oberholzer's house, so you can see where they both lived.
Yeah, all the badness, or a lot of the badness happened in the garage back behind the house. So
Right.
And the association of Marge with Butler, and that history, that she was a Butler student, and that he really preyed upon her. And there's a lot of articles that have been written about those who stood up to him, but as you said, he was all power. But we have to again about history to repeat its mistakes.
Right. Okay, any other questions for me?
Thank you very much.
Just want to thank you for coming.
Ashley,
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for doing this, for continuing to shine a light on some of the weird, interesting, quirky aspects of Indianapolis. Can't wait to read the updated 100 list. I think we should make it a challenge to try to knock off as many of those as possible.
I agree.
In appreciation for your visit, the Kiwanis Foundation of Indianapolis will be making a donation in your name to Here, Indiana. They deliver hope and resources to children across the state with hearing loss. So thank you
awesome.
so much for being here. There's no other announcements. I will go ahead and adjourn the meeting. We look forward to seeing you at Iozo's for lunch on Monday.
Thank you again.